Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the JRA webinar on extracurricular activities and your resume and how they make all the difference in the college admissions process. I am Donna Barron, and I'm here with my colleague, Ellen Baladares, and we are thrilled to have you with us tonight. So thank you for joining. So just a bit of information before we start. Moving on to the next slide, we will be broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube this evening, and the session will be recorded. So if you miss anything this evening, not to worry. You will be receiving an email with the link to the recording. We also have some great downloads for you tonight, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So let me just go over what we will be covering tonight. We will start with an admissions overview and talk about how extracurriculars fit into the admissions process. Then we will cover what colleges look for in extracurricular activities, how they learn about your extracurricular activities, the importance of your resume, how they evaluate your activities, and why summer activities matter so much. So the downloads that we have for you to supplement tonight's presentation include 2 different versions of a Common App activities worksheet. Then we have a list of all the colleges on the Common App that will allow you to upload your resume. We have some information on how to use the additional information section on the Common App. And then we have information on how to use your summer time wisely and productively. All right, so we'd like to start this evening by giving you an overview of the admissions process, seen from the view of an admissions officer. You'll see that there are several elements that go into the process, and this is why we call it a holistic review process, because what admissions officers are evaluating is not just one part of a student's profile, but really the profile in its entirety. So if we go to the top of the diagram, you'll see academics. And the reason academics are at the top is because although many elements will be evaluated, we can all agree on the fact that academics are the most important element. So a student's academic profile will be made up of their grades, the rigor that they took in high school, the level of the rigor, their test scores, so ACT or SAT test scores, perhaps their AP scores if they submit them, and any academic honors they might have won. So those will all be lumped together to create the student's academic profile. After that's been evaluated, the admissions officer will go on and look for what they refer to as intellectual curiosity. So what they're really trying to discern here is, how did the student use their time outside of the classroom? Were there any particular areas that they took a deep dive into to deepen their knowledge? Do they show any type of love of learning? And this, as you can probably assume, these are the aspects that really reflect in the extracurricular activities. So this is the area that we will be focusing on this evening. Moving on, just to briefly talk about the other aspects, if we could just go back, Ellen, very quickly. Right, just to briefly tell you what the rest of the admissions profile looks like. They will also be looking at impact. Now, this will not apply to all students, but really to a smaller group of students who are applying to highly selective universities. And those universities will expect the talented students who apply there to have used their talents to give back somehow to society, to their communities, to their peers, and to make an impact. And usually that happens through some sort of a project. And we do help students create these projects. We refer to them often as passion projects. But again, this will not be relevant for all students. Then they will go on to try to discern what kind of a character the student has. And you might ask yourself why that's important. And the reason that's important is that when a university admits a student, we have to remember they're not only admitting the student to their classrooms, but also to their community and even to their alumni community. So they're looking for people with good character. character matters. So they're looking to see, is the student a leader? Is he innovative? Is she involved in community? So these things are important to admissions officers. And then lastly, they will try to find out what the student's personal skills are. And these are things like determination and drive and grit and ability to overcome adversity. And those are also important to admissions officers. And the tools that we use to communicate these elements are also your extracurricular activities can show some of these qualities, but even more so your admissions essays. So your essays will be a very important part of your application process, and your recommendation letters that your teachers will write for you. So when all these elements are assessed together, they should explain to an admissions officer what your story is. And that's why your story is in the middle. And an application for an admissions officer is almost like reading the chapters of a book. And when it's done, he should understand your story, and all the elements should come together to make sense. Okay. So this is a little recap of what we just talked about. And really what we're doing here is prioritizing the elements that we just looked at. And you'll see that the first three all refer to the student's academic profile, as it is of key importance. So they are looking for strong academics, for an upward trend in academics over your high school years, and for strong SAT scores or ACT scores. But then they will move on to look for your meaningful extracurriculars. So let's dive into that a little bit deeper. So what makes an extracurricular meaningful is the question here. There are several things that come together to make an extracurricular meaningful, but we start with the long-term commitment. So parents often ask me, should my student be well-rounded? And the answer is usually no, not really, because colleges are not looking for students who jump around from one activity to another, or try something in 9th grade and something in 10th and something else in 11th. What they're really valuing is a student who makes a long-term commitment to just a couple of activities, and that they show a passion for those activities and show deep involvement in those activities. Then leadership is also something that can very much enrich an application. So colleges need leaders on campus, and they appreciate leadership skills. So if a student has the opportunity to have one of their activities evolve into a leadership role, that can very much enhance an application. Initiative is very important. Colleges love students who make things happen. So, you know, the future movers and shakers of the world. So students who take the initiative to start clubs, start organizations, manage projects. And, you know, in this sense, we're not referring to entrepreneurship in a business sense, but rather students who are willing to take risks and make things happen. Collaboration is really a buzzword on the college landscape these days, because within colleges, from research to classroom projects to campus activities, students really need to collaborate. So being able to show a college that you have collaborated, that you've learned how to collaborate and are able to do so successfully, can be a very powerful trait. And there are a lot of activities which inherently allow students or even force students to collaborate. For example, music, band. Band is a great collaboration activity, as is theater, as is debate, or even sports, athletics. So these are all areas in which students are collaborating with their peers, and they can show colleges on their applications that they've really developed a sense of community, which is so important in college life. Then impact. So we already mentioned impact, and this can be shown through an official project, but there are other ways to show impact as well, through your more standard activities. For example, I've had HOSA students who ran blood drives. And even if you're just, a normal member of HOSA and not even in a leadership position, you can organize a blood drive and work on it and show exactly how much blood you've collected and how many lives that blood could theoretically save. So that is a way of showing impact on a project. I cannot overestimate the importance of the relevance of your extracurricular activities to your intended major. So what you're doing over the course of your high school career is really trying to develop a profile that you're going to present to colleges. And the closer your profile comes to reflecting your intended major, the stronger and more powerful your applications will be. There are certain majors that actually will expect students to have gone out of their way to inform themselves and develop some insight into the field before they apply. And this applies especially to the pre-professional programs, such as pre-med or pre-business or even engineering. So colleges do appreciate it when students have engaged in activities which have allowed them to learn about the field, gain some insight into the field and some experience in the field, so that they understand the intensity of the major that they're engaging in, and so that they succeed in that major, because colleges want students who succeed. And then, of course, legacy is always great. If you can start a club that was so successful and so meaningful to your peers that they carry it on in your legacy after you graduate, that is also a very powerful statement. And of course, colleges will use your activities to help determine whether or not you're suited for a particular major. Now, this is a list of meaningful extracurricular activities, and it is by no means exhaustive, but there are some great ideas here. And instead of going over every point on the list, I'd like to highlight a couple that I think are particularly interesting. For example, research. Colleges do very much respect students who have a research background, especially in some areas like medicine or even engineering. And you may think that research opportunities are hard to come by, but you'd be surprised how many research opportunities are out there. There are many college professors who are very open to having high school students support their research projects. And it's simply a matter of doing some research about, what professors are out there who are researching your topic of interest. There are also companies that you can pay to connect you with a graduate student at a high-level research university, which might be something like MIT or Johns Hopkins or Duke. And that graduate student will guide you through a research project, and you will most likely be contributing to his or her research, but you will, in the end, be a research contributor. And that's a very powerful addition to your activities list on the Common App. Another interesting point that you see on here is caring for a family member, because I often have students who tell me, I don't have time to do extracurricular activities because I have responsibilities at home, or I have a disabled sibling who I need to care for. But the interesting thing is that is an extracurricular activity. So anything that you do outside of the classroom that is of meaning, or where you're learning or contributing, is considered an extracurricular activity. Another great one here is an internship. So again, if you are a pre-med student, get out there and get yourself a summer internship at a hospital or a shadowing opportunity with a doctor, because that will very much enhance your application. Pre-business students should be out there doing internships with CPAs at accounting firms or with your local chamber of commerce. So internships can be very powerful. Now, working out, not so much. The only time I've seen working out really be a valuable addition to a resume was in the case of a kinesiology student, where it really was all about health and wellness. So it might fit in that case, but in most cases, working out is not something that you're going to want to add to your activities list. So again, this list is not exhaustive, and you can come up with a lot of great ideas on your own. So I will be coming back to talk more about extracurricular activities, but at this point, I would love to turn over to my colleague Ellen, who will discuss with you how to actually take these activities and apply them to a resume and how to communicate them to colleges.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you so much. That's all very great information. I want to mention too, before I go on, that we will be answering questions that you might have. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So if anything comes up, please just put them in the chat and we will get to them later. So what I want to dive into is now, you've got these wonderful extracurricular activities. How do you communicate them in a way? How do you tell that story in a meaningful way to the colleges? So I'm going to go over 3 of the main ways that you do have to do it. And the first one is the common app activities section. And then another one is your resume. And then essays are another way to elaborate on your extracurriculars. So we'll go into that a little bit more. So first, I don't know if everybody is familiar with what the Common App is. If you're only freshman or sophomore, maybe you just haven't gotten there yet. The Common App at commonapp.org is basically the application where over 1,000 colleges and universities, it's the platform that you'll use to apply to most of your colleges. And then the Common App portion of it will have all general profile information about you that you only have to kind of put in once, that goes to every college. It's updatable, but you only have to do it once. And part of that is the activity section. And this is the part where you're going to take your activities and communicate them the best way that you can. So this is kind of what you would see. It says this is where we want to understand your life outside of the classroom. Examples might be art or music, clubs, community engagement, family responsibilities, just as Donna said, a really big one, taking care of, maybe it's an elderly grandmother or a sibling, hobbies, sports, work, paid work, volunteering. So now you get 10 of these sections to fill out. And I just want to kind of give you a preview of what that is going to look like and how that it's a very abbreviated way that you have to tell your story. So you get about, first you pick which type it is, and then you get just about 50 characters to tell what your description is. And when I'm saying characters, that means including spaces. And really I kind of make a game out of it because you really have to find a way to fit all your words into these boxes. And I want to mention just on the position leadership description that's somewhere where you can use those 50 characters to be a little bit creative, to tell them a little bit more, instead of like if you're in some clubs and you just say member, maybe you can say active committee member, or, something else, chair of something, if you don't have that, or you can find volunteer, so think of some other words besides just member, which can be, but it's fine if that's all that you have, and for some of them. So then you mention what the program is. And then if you see, I don't know how well you can see this, but in the bottom box, this is where you would have your description of, and you only get 150 characters, and that's just characters, not words, including spaces. So to describe what you did. So we're talking about a medical program. So this person said, sparked desire to pursue medical profession, attended lectures, examined cadavers, simulated patient rounds, interacted with students from around the world. Now you can see where we abbreviated some things, like the with is a W and a slash. So that's where you kind of also get creative. And instead of using the word and, you use the ampersand or the and, symbol. And don't use the word I. That's a waste of characters. You really don't need that. And you want to have some strong verbs in there. So it's important. I mean, this is probably the biggest part of your Common App that you should spend a lot of time on, and make sure that you fill this out to the best of your abilities, to really tell your story as strongly as you can in those few spaces that you have. Again, you get 10 of those spaces. You don't have to fill in all of those 10. And like we were saying, a few activities that you've really spent most of your time in is stronger than having many different activities. So not necessarily, it's not necessary to fill in every single one. So now, in addition to that, you have an option that you can do for yourself, and some students will do this and some may not. But we're going to tell you why having an activity resume is really beneficial also. And the way I work with students is really the best thing is to start building your resume as soon as possible. Even in freshman year, start keeping track of what you're doing. And you can use this for so many things, including filling out your activity section later. It becomes very helpful. So this does help you expand a lot more on your story. And this is a place in your resume where, for instance, in your essays, that's not a place for you to brag about yourself and say, I did this and I did that. And in other places, but in your activity section and in your resume, which you will have space to do that, it's your place to say, I did all this, and show your accomplishments, and in a very strong way, and quantify them and qualify them and show what impact you have, describe what you did, what you created. So you can really expand on the things that you've done. So some of the other things, here you can use the resume to emphasize that you had that depth of commitment. And I'm going to show you some examples of resume so you can see the bullet points and how we do expand on some of those things. It helps the admissions officers, the ones that do accept the resumes, to see a bigger picture of who you are. So other things that this resume can be beneficial for is, I love this, it builds your self-confidence, because I do often have students who say, oh, I haven't done a whole lot. But then they start putting it together and you see wow, well, I really did accomplish. I mean, all of us should do that, is really to write down everything we've accomplished and look at that and appreciate what we have done. And so it does build your self-confidence. It helps you tell your story. And it's a great tool for when you might have interviews for colleges as part of the admissions process, or if something comes up like a job or an internship, or it can be anything, joining an honor society, scholarships, the resume will be on hand and you'll have it, and it's always updatable. So that's great. And it tells your story and helps your application stand out. So do all colleges take a resume? Not necessarily. But what happens is on the Common App, and we are offering you have a download that lists all the colleges that do take a resume. At least 300 or more do allow for you to upload the resume. So you can see a few samples of the ones here. Now, if they don't do it on the Common App, there's also an opportunity maybe on their website or the portal, which is what you will create after you've completed your application. You've sent in your application, and then you create a portal with the school. And it's, for example, Florida State, through their portal, allows you to upload your resume there. Then there are some schools that have their own applications, like MIT and Georgetown, and they will allow you to submit a resume too. So there is that. And I wanted to show you an example. So this would be an example of what it might look like on the Common App when they ask you to submit your resume. So this is an example from the University of Central Florida. So if you wish, it's definitely usually optional. I would say always optional. I don't know if anybody requires it, but you can upload it. And I want to mention a couple tips on that. I know that when I work with students on the resumes, that we go through several versions, and there may be we call the title of the document is version 1, version 2. Make sure before you upload it, you name it just your name and resume, and save it as a PDF and then upload it. So that's just something. So let's look at a couple of examples of what am I talking about with these resumes. The activity resume that we're talking about is different from a career resume. Some of the differences are that we're not going to list dates on here. We're going to list the grades. This activity resume is going to cover just your 9th through 12th grades, high school activities only. Now, if you have been playing lacrosse since you were in 5th grade, sure, you can put that on your resume and show that, because it is showing your long-term involvement. But for the most part, you're going to not put something that you only did in middle school. That wouldn't be here. If it's something that you're currently doing in high school or have done in high school or in your summers between the years, that would go on your resume. And again, all kinds of different activities go on here. So here's an example. And again, I don't know how clearly you can see this, but this student was going for a major in pre-med, wants to be a doctor eventually, and wants to study healthcare biology in her college. So she did lead with her experience that she gained. So she called it medicine, healthcare related activities and research that she did. One of the things when you create these resumes, and we're going to show you, is that you can create any kinds of categories that fit who you are to tell your story. So it doesn't have to just be work, school, education. No, you can be creative with these, like medicine, healthcare, and then leadership, and then meaningful commitments. So, and you see, so what I wanted to point out also with these resumes is that you have many bullet points that under each one. So you're expanding a lot more and saying a lot more than you can on just the activity section. So hopefully an admissions officer looks at this in a little bit more detail and can find out something maybe more in depth about what you experienced and about who you are. So another quick thing to point out, a couple of things. You see the yellow and the black. You can also change the colors of your resume per school, right? So this student, I think this was a UCF, University of Central Florida resume she was applying to. And so you look up their official colors, and this resume was done on Canva, which is a very popular place to do resumes right now. And that you can use any kind of template, and we have some templates we use with our students. And then you can change the color according to the school that you're applying to. Another thing I wanted to point out was that your honors and your awards and your other interests should always come at the end. So some of the traps about using Canva and for your resumes are that you're going to get these preloaded career ones that a lot of times have, those honors and things up front. And maybe sometimes it's okay if it's kind of to the side. But generally you want to put that stuff towards the end. And also, this is not a place to put your GPA and your AP scores. I see that a lot, that students put their GPA and, you know, what all their AP classes that they're taking. That's in your application, so don't use that space. Another thing is, you'll notice this is 2 pages. It's fine to have your activity resume be 2 pages. I've even had some maybe 3 pages. I don't think they want to see 3 pages too often, but you tell your story in the way, you know, that you can tell it. I think 2 pages is good, but it's not, again, a career resume. They tell you just keep it to 1 page. Here, you don't really have to do that. So just a quick thing I wanted to point out to you. So using the example that we had in the activity section, this is the same thing on her resume. So where we had to say spark desire and all that, here we could say a little bit more. So where in the activity section, you know, we said she attended lectures. Here we could say she attended anatomy, medical ethics, illnesses, and medical imaging lectures. She also could elaborate on performing abdominal exams and ultrasounds and taking blood pressure. So it just allows you to say a lot more. Now, and something else we're going to give you a handout on is for the schools that don't ask you for an optional upload of your resume, you can actually use the additional information section on the Common App to copy and paste things that maybe did not fit into the activity section. So you just want to be careful that you're not repeating anything. We don't want redundant information. But if you have a few activities that couldn't fit in there, or something that's really important or expanded that you feel is important for them to see, there is a way to copy and paste that into your application. So just another example of different ways to display a resume by using some cute little pictures. And what we love about these resumes is that an admissions officer kind of glances at this and already knows, oh, student government, youth leaders, gardens, like they kind of like get a picture of you just from literally the pictures. So that's a great way. And you can kind of see on this resume too, how you can list all your different titles that you've had under each thing. You don't have to list everything separate. And again, all the different bullet points. Okay, and here's another example just to show you more pictures, the use of pictures on a resume and different color background. So some things to highlight on your resume include your most meaningful activities during your high school. Organize them by category, which we've said. Now is, again, as Donna mentioned, your major, if you know, and having extracurriculars that relate to your major can be very important. So if you are going to apply for business and you've done DECA and other business things, make sure that's up front in your resume. And so you can arrange it with your most meaningful category first. Make sure this is not chronological by any means. It's most meaningful. Within each category, you can list the things from most to least important and not necessarily in chronological order. Again, list your honors last. And as we said, don't include GPA rank and all those other things there. As I mentioned, here's some ideas, and maybe you want to screenshot this or take a picture, because these are some ideas of categories that you might use on a resume. But it also just gives you an idea of, you know, some different, how you can be so creative. I mean, science, medicine, research, combining all of those. Or maybe your artistic, the arts. So there's one here, the arts. Maybe you've done theater and visual arts, you know, so there's different ways, you know, to combine things, sports, broadcasting, and journalism. So think outside. And I love this, like animal rights and leadership. Right away, I know, okay, this is a person who is specializing in animal rights. So the categories are also stick out and tell me something about you. So also just quickly, and on your resume for each category, for each activity, I'm sorry, these are kind of what the bullet points should relay to whoever's reading it. So it's why you did the activity, how you did it, what you accomplished, how you and others were impacted. My favorite thing is what you gained. Did you learn collaboration? Did you learn teamwork? Did you learn, what did you learn and what did you gain? Show them how you grew by doing this activities. And again, emphasize leadership initiative and think of things that set you apart. And again, I always say quantify as much as possible when you have something to quantify. If you started a club, I want to know, you grew it to 35 plus members in, the first 2 years. So anything you can quantify makes it very solid and important. Okay, so that was a lot about the resume. And I feel like we have other webinars that delve into it. The last way that you can communicate more about your extracurriculars is, again, not something that's always available to you, but some colleges will offer the extracurricular essay. Or even if it's something very strong, it could go in your main personal essay. But this is a common question. For the last several years, the University of Florida has had these questions on there, so I'm using it as an example. Please provide more details on your most meaningful commitment outside the classroom while in high school and explain why it was meaningful. So just a quick overview on writing this essay. The resume was a place to list what you did and quantify and all those things. The essay is not. The essay is for storytelling. It's your place to really dig in and tell me how this activity transformed you in your own words through stories. So it's showing, not telling so much, right? So, maybe it's like I showed up every weekend at the shelter and played games with this older gentleman, and soon he was telling me stories. But what I gained out of this was a learning, da 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 da. That actually comes from somebody's essay I had. So think along the lines of that, because it's the impact that it had on you and why it was so meaningful to you, right? And a lot of times we want to talk about the impact on others, which is important, but we don't want to just say, oh, I did this and it helped, all these kids and they were so grateful to me. I want to know that seeing the smiles on those faces made you understand something in life. So that's what we want to see. Your college application, they want to know that you've reflected on who you are and who you've become because of what you've been doing throughout high school. And that's part of that. So just a little thing that we do go much more in depth into essays in another webinar that usually I do with Kathy Hart in the summer. So this is just a very quick recap. And I think we are back to Donna.
All right. Thank you, Ellen. That was all great information. So now that Ellen has explained what the Common App activities list is and how important it is, it's very crucial that when you're putting your list together, that you give a lot of thought to how to prioritize your activities. So there are a couple of criteria that you can use to prioritize your activities in terms of what's in place number 1, what's in place number 2, and so on of the 10 spots that are available for activities. So the first thing that you need to look at is what was your level of intensity of participation. So the activities that you were involved in for 4 years need to go up to the top of your activities list because they show commitment and determination and that you can stick with things. And ideally, it will be an activity that also reflects an area of interest that you'd like to continue to discover in college. So your level of commitment is one criterion that you use to evaluate where to place your activities on the list. The next thing we want to look at is the level of your leadership. So if you had a leadership position, if you were captain of a team or president of a club, you want to put that toward the top of your list. Relevance to major. So here's where we break some rules, because even though, let's say you only did your hospital internship for one summer, but you want to be a pre-med major, that internship is very relevant to your application, so you will put that near the top of your list. And then measurable impact, of course, if you've done anything that did have an impact on your community or on your peers or on your society, and you can measure it and say, I improved this by this percentage, that's going to be an important activity as well. So it's a little bit of a puzzle that you have to piece together in terms of what goes where, but basically impact, leadership, and relevance to major, along with measured impact, is really how you want to look at prioritizing those activities. So to go into a little more depth of prioritizing the activities into tiers, we've developed 4 tiers of activities that you can use to apply to your activities to kind of see where they fit in the priority order. So a tier 1 activity would be a very high level activity, and normally one that would have some sort of national recognition. And this is the kind of activity that would be critical for a highly selective college, an Ivy League school, a top 20 school. So it would be something national. It might be you were in the national math competition. You might have been in the national Siemens science competition. You might have won a national piano competition. You might be an athlete who won some sort of national competition. So these are very high level activities that we would put in tier 1. Tier 2 would be a similar activity, and it would be also a high achievement, but more so at a state level. So you might have competed in debate at a state level. You might have competed in FBLA or DECA at a state level and have placed at the state level. You might be in the Science Olympiad at state level, or your student government was involved at state level. So that is what we would consider a tier 2 activity. And these generally are the types of activities that you will need to be involved in if you are targeting highly selective colleges. Now, a tier 3 activity will be also important, but it will be at school level. So you might be the chair of your instrument in band, or you might be the captain of a team, you might be the president of a club. But these will be at school level and very important as well. And then tier 4 is what we would consider general membership. So I don't have a leadership position in a club. I'm not an officer, but I am a member. And please don't think that that is unimportant, because it's not, because even members of clubs who don't have leadership positions can be very active members. They can organize events. They can go to all the meetings and contribute. And of course, you want to highlight that on your activities list. As Ellen pointed out, no matter what the activity is, even if you weren't a leader, I'm sure that you learned some skills just by being a part of an organization or a club. So you always want to highlight on your activities list what you learned. So I was a member and I learned teamwork and I learned collaboration. So there is no unimportant activity, but the tiers of activities are important for you to keep in mind, because if you do want to target very selective universities, you will be required to be involved in some sort of high level activities. And we hope that you start early on to get involved in those activities so that you can also show long-term commitment to those. So just to sum up that last slide, when you are looking at how to prioritize, think like an admissions officer. So we've talked about what they want to see. They want to see your passion in your talent, both in and outside of the classroom. They want to see students who took initiative, who started clubs, who organized events, who organized activities. Maybe you don't have a leadership position in a club, but maybe you organized a dance marathon that raised a lot of money, or a blood drive that raised a lot of, that collected a lot of blood. So members can be important if they take initiative to make things happen. Then, of course, they are going to look at your impact and the relevance to the activities to your major, and the quantity of the impact that you've had through those activities. So let's move on to talk about summer, because colleges look very closely at how you use your time in the summer. And they want to see that you've used it wisely and productively. So I do not want to be the Grim Reaper here, and I do want to make sure that you have fun in the summer and that you do things that you enjoy. But at the same time, it's great to get involved in some productive activities over the summer that you can add to your activities list, and that will enhance your application. So there is no template for how a student should spend his summer. This will be a very unique decision. So there's no right or wrong way to spend your summer, because it will really depend on what your goals are for college, and it will depend on your interests. It will depend on the time you have available. You might travel with your family during the summer and not have that much time available. And it will depend on your finances, because some activities do cost money. So there is no template, and it's a very unique situation. I also want to just point out that I want to kind of debunk a common myth, because I see families who send their kids across the country to do a pre-college summer program because they believe that that will help them get into that particular college, but it actually won't. So there is no one summer program that will help you get into any particular college. Colleges appreciate all the summer programs that you do, whether at their college or at a different college, and they will evaluate that in a general way and not specifically to their own institution. So there is no program that will help you get into a specific college, but summer programs in general will just enhance your profile and strengthen your applications. So admissions officers in general are looking for evidence that you're hungry to learn and that you have a desire to gain knowledge, even in summer. So let's go on to talk about some types of summer activities that you might want to engage in. Now, this list is also not exhaustive, and you can combine these activities. You might combine 2 or 3 of these activities over the course of your summer, but some things that you can take part in over the summer that will enhance your applications and strengthen your profile are, for example, pre-college summer programs at universities. So many universities across the country will offer pre-college summer programs to high school students. And these programs give students an opportunity to experience what it's like to be in a college classroom and on a college campus, and also will provide them with insight into an academic area that they're interested in studying. So this will be something valuable that you can add to your activities list, and will be insightful to a student who might not be sure what they want to study, because you might take a pre-college summer program and decide that that's not what you want to study. So they're very valuable programs, and they do very much enhance your applications. There are also internship opportunities. As we touched on earlier, colleges love students with practical experience. So students who went out and rolled up their sleeves and got their hands dirty and really learned firsthand about the area that they're interested in studying. So internships are very valuable in all areas, whether medical, business, engineering. If you're interested in journalism, you can get an internship at a newspaper or an online publication. So there are all kinds of internships out there, and they will also very much strengthen your applications. Shadowing opportunities are great for pre-med students. Summer research programs, again, for many different potential majors. I have had students who participated in research programs at various local universities here in Florida, like Florida Atlantic University. So it's really worth it to reach out to college professors and find out what they're researching and if there's anything you can support them with. Part-time jobs. I know colleges that look specifically for students who have engaged in part-time work because they're quite interested in students who have learned skills like time management and discipline and the people skills that they learn through a part-time job. So part-time jobs can be very impressive on a resume. Or you might want to travel and be involved in language immersion, which is, if you want to travel, it looks much better on your resume than traveling just for the sake of traveling. Or you might want to take summer courses. So maybe you are not on track to reach the highest level of math or science at your high school, but if you took a summer course, that would bump up your academics and allow you to take that highest level in the fall. So a summer course is a great thing to do. Or you might want to take whatever your passion already is that you've been working on throughout high school and delve more deeply into it. So if you're a performing artist, you might want to learn a new skill. Or if you are an athlete, you might want to delve deeper into your athletics and travel with the summer team. Or if you're interested in software programming, you might want to learn a new programming language. So the point here is there are a lot of things you can do to enrich your summer and enhance your applications and your activities list and your resume. But make sure that you have fun while you're doing it. Fun's an important part of summer. So that concludes the information that we wanted to share with you this evening. We hope you found it valuable. I want to touch on a couple of other things before we address your questions. We have another great webinar coming up that our colleague Anne will host on March 5th, and that is for all the aspiring athletes out there because she will focus on the topic of athletic recruiting. So if you're interested in that topic, please be sure to register for that webinar. And if you have enjoyed this webinar, we have a whole lot of other recordings of webinars at scorewebinar.com that you can go online and watch the recordings of. There's a great webinar that the owner of JRA, Judy Rabinovitz, does on the Common App. So it's all the ins and outs and nuances of how to fill out the Common App. And some people think that the Common App is pretty straightforward, but there really are a lot of tricks and nuances that you can use to make your application more powerful. So I highly suggest watching that webinar. And we have some specials going on, so please go onto the website and check those out. And this one is focused on your GPA checkup. So some students may not realize that the GPA that they record on their application, whether weighted or unweighted, is not the GPA that the colleges they apply to will actually use in the review process, because the colleges will recalculate your GPA based on just your core classes. So this special will talk you through how to recalculate your own GPA so that you know where you stand. And also, please don't forget that you can always reach out to us with your questions, either at this phone number or at hello@jraec.com. And we're happy to take your questions. We will try to answer the questions that you have this evening, but if you have any that you feel are more in-depth than you'd like to address this evening, please always feel free to reach out to us.
Okay.
So at this point, I think we will go into the chat and see if anyone had questions.
Okay.
Can you see that, Ellen, or would you like me to?
I am coming over.
All right.
Let's see. I see. Let's see. Yes, I see a question. Should the activities section of the Common App list your resume items in the same order? And I think what you're asking is, yeah, does your resume and the Common App list, should they be in the same order? My answer to that, and then Donna can answer too, they're not going to be in the same order. And that's a very good question. When filling out the Common App activities section, I always tell my students, you got to think like you're going to put your top 5 things at the first 5, because think that the admissions person may just look at those first 5 and that's it. And so rather than seeing things on your resume, you're going to have all your athletics categorized and your other things. So on your activities list, I like to mix them up a little bit. So if they're just seeing 5, they know, oh, this person did do some things related to the major. They are an athlete and they did debate also. Okay. So that's how I would say no, not the same as the resume. What about you, Donna?
I agree, because I think it is important to, as opposed to just categorizing the activities, that you do have to, as we just mentioned, look into how involved you were. For example, things like your years of involvement and your leadership roles, as opposed to just the categories. So it will definitely, your activities list will not be a mirror image of your resume. No.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's all the questions I see. Just one question. And let me just I'm going to run our emails. This is also Donna. If you wanted to reach us directly, these are our emails, donna@jraec.com or Ellen. And if you have a question that you come up with, you can definitely reach out to us. Was there anything else we forgot to add, Donna?
I don't think so, but please do, as Ellen said, please do feel free to reach out. If there's anything that we didn't answer, or if any questions come up afterwards, reach out to us anytime. We'd be happy to hear from you.
Let me just make sure I don't see anything else in the chat. So thank you all for being here. And
thank you very much for joining us tonight. And we hope you found this valuable.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. See you soon.